Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with my good friends, Kelly and Jason. We're here to do as much as we can to help as many people as we can, help themselves as much as they can. Chat's wide open. Depend on chat to be relevant and well directed in the most valuable ways. So always appreciate comments from the audience. The word of the day is audience. I thought that would be a good way to put things in perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly, and Kelly can give you a quick update and share her initial thoughts on audience.
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. Audience, what an interesting word for today. But of course, my brain goes in all sorts of directions because the marketer in me, of course, goes into a place where y'all know I'm going to say something about pitch slap today. Um, because it all has to do with knowing your audience. Excuse me, and then about live streaming and knowing your audience and figuring out your audience. I think sometimes maybe to keep it in the business lane for this first round for me, I will, is knowing your audience. And I have found that several clients that I've worked with over my career have thought their audience was one thing and it was not. And they had difficulty in pivoting towards that because in their mind, they knew like this thing, my service, my product, it applies to this group of people. And it was like, but those aren't the people that are responding. We're getting responses from people that are in this group. This is the audience. And them not pivoting to that because they thought they knew better. And I think sometimes that's another word or another topic for a different day. It's fascinating because when our own ego gets in our way, we think we know best for what it is, particularly when it is a product or service, because we hold it so dear to ourselves. We know it intimately. We've created it. We've nurtured it. We've, blood, sweat, and tears into it, and have difficulty in taking the feedback when it's right in front of us. And so I think that's an interesting way to start is knowing your audience and also knowing when you need to pivot your audience, because sometimes you don't know best because you see it from a totally different perspective. So I think I'll leave it there to start with.
That's a great start, Kelly. So appreciated. Jason, what's your thoughts?
That's great. So I have to tell you, the thing I love about live stream and about being with this group is that you never know what's going to go. So I have a couple notes, and I was like, oh, I'm going to open up with these few points, and I got a couple little things. And I was going to quote what Don says, but great points. And I'm like, nope, that's not it. That's not the conversation right now. So thank you, Kelly, for that.
Maybe later.
That's exactly. I got something. I put it aside. But to your point, yeah, that's so true. And I've worked with a marketing coach, and it's about your niche or your niche, whatever you call it, and finding that and all that. And to your point, I'm going to kind of just go deeper on your point. I'm presenting a certain way. I'm showing up a certain way. I'm doing certain things, and even though in my mind I have a certain audience, the reality is it's not. For at certain times, it's a different audience. It's a different group of people that I'm actually speaking to. But the interesting thing is that no matter, I do have that in my mindset. And if I'm gonna set up marketing, if I'm gonna be strategic, I need to be aware of that, because you want to, you could talk to this much better than I, but you want to focus on that, and you want to drill down, and you want to do certain things, and you want to show up in certain places. Always show up where they are. But I'm still me, and it's that shift from, so who am I, and who am I actually talking to? And so being aware of that I want to say reciprocity, but it's not, but that circle, what's that flow, and who am I speaking with? Because I might just be a talking head at this point, saying what I want to say, but I'm not reaching the people I want to reach. So kind of in a way, I'm just saying what you said, Kelly, is know your audience, know who you're speaking to, and that relationship will blossom from there, even greater than you could have imagined.
Well, yeah, that's terrific, because Kelly really put us on a strong foundation, and you followed up with it. And, it's all where the flow goes. So when you're deciding who's your audience, are you thinking about who your audience is, their audience? right? Is it aligned? You know, you may be reaching the people you want, but will it continue with them and through them? And I think that's really the key to building a community from an audience, right? An audience is usually someone that shows up and wants to be educated or inspired or entertained, but is there real value? And if there's real value, there's more continuity to it, right? You build with it. You know, if you had a new audience every time you did a new show or any show, you'd have to readjust to it. And that's where comments come in. That's the only chance you have of any feedback. And, there's no value to a poll of one, right? So if it's just one person and they say something, it doesn't mean change course, because until you get a composite of the people out there. And the other part of the show is for yourself to get better at speaking, to get better at live streaming, to get better at connecting. And if you connect here, it's easier to continue that and connect in other forms with other people, because you're really focused on them and their value, where a lot of people who do shows are self-promotional. They only talk about me, me, me. They're not into we. They're not into learning from others. And you limit yourself and you limit everybody around you when you don't open access to everybody. So we've got Kerry with his first joke today. Why did the pecan pie become a stand-up comedian? Because it always cracked jokes. Okay, I guess a pecan does crack. Agree, we go with this group is so much better than just ego. Thank you, Dennis, for saying that. You're always so positive and inspiring. And moving back to Kelle, I know we've had so many sessions together, and you've had so many sessions independently. How has it transformed your ability to relate to people that you might not have been able to relate to in the past?
Oh, that's a good question. And here, my experience, I always speak from my experience. I feel like it's all about just being yourself. I think when people tend to, and we see this a lot in the outside world right now, I'll just leave it at that, where people adjust to their audience. And meaning, like, they'll change the way they speak, their cadence, the words they use, etc. That's not my jam. Like, I feel like you show up as you regardless. And it should be the same, because the audience should know when you show up, you're going to be who you are. If I'm invited to be on a show that's going to talk about biochemistry, I'm likely not going to have a whole lot to say. But I think that's important, because people see who you are regardless of what comes out of your mouth. We've all seen that. And this is, I can swing back into the pitch slap. Because what we do not like is when someone is trying to sell us or pushing something on us. We feel it. Even if we can't consciously say that that's what's happening, we feel it. We're repelled from it. We don't like it. When people are genuinely themselves, and I have people say this to me, they're like, "Oh, you should have been in sales. You could sell anything." And I'm like, "No, I can't. No, I couldn't. I can sell what I'm passionate about, because people feel that." Right. And that is, I think, such an important thing with audience, is just being you and figuring out who that is. Because I will say, live streaming for me, and I've talked about this quite a bit, is coming out of corporate America as an executive. I was expected to act a certain way. Now, granted, I was always myself, but there was still a little, vest of corporate America that I would have to wear once I crossed that threshold into the building every day. And live streaming, and I think doing anything where you're talking in front of people, whether it's Zoom calls or what have you, people can tell if you're genuine. And I think that's an important, and authentic. I mean, those are big keywords for folks these days. I think that matters. So I don't know. I think I'll leave it there, because I think this is a good place for Jason to pick up and run with.
Wonderful place. Jason.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about what both of you were saying, and thinking about AI, because we talk about the, artificial intelligence a lot, and you can have a lot of good copy made by AI, but when people come to meet you, they're like, "That's not how you talk. That's not who you
Yes.
are. That's not your message. I don't understand." And I get it. It's a tool. Like I always said, it's a tool. There's ways to
Yes.
work with a tool. You can build in filters, and I know there's a lot LinkedIn people out there right now screaming, like, "No, Jason, don't tell them that." That people actually teach you how to use AI, and it's a great tool. And I do use it. I'll use it for prompts, and then I feed into it. I'd say, "Hey, what about this?" And then I build from there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying in general, that's like using, if you have a marketing manager that doesn't know what your voice is, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And then people meet you and they're like, "Who are you?" And then that just, to use the word repel, that repels them. And like, now you've just lost any credibility that you had. The thing I like about like this and doing LinkedIn lives and this, there's nowhere to hide. This is it. We might be able to, I mean, and we've all done training and teaching in our lives for sure. And we are all teachers and trainers. And we just talked about that yesterday. But at some point, you will show up. I'll share a quick story. When I was in the corporate world, when I was interviewing a lot of thousands of people I've interviewed over my 26 years doing what I did, I got tired of, well, not tired of, that's bad, that's a little aggressive, but the point was to know who the person was and how they were actually going to fit in with the team and how they were going to work and build into that. And so they would come prepared for interview questions. They were ready. My strengths, my weakness, all the questions that you hear from everywhere. And I would always just make it conversational. And every single time the real person showed up. And I was like, that's who I was looking for, whether good or bad. People that came in all polished, and then I would, "Hey, have you ever dealt with this?" And they would just flip a switch, and just, you saw the real, be aggressive, and you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, that's not going to do well." Or someone maybe that was quiet, and someone that was just kind of a little, not really engaging, and they were a little nervous. They would open up, and you would see, oh, this is a shining star. This is someone that's amazing. So the way to tie this into audience is, be authentic. Be yourself, and your people will find you. Your community will find you based off of that.
Yeah, those are wonderful points. And actually, it just expands the possibilities of what one could leverage audience with. I think that both your point, Jason, and Kelly's point is this is your chance to go back to yourself, to be yourself again. So many people have been compromised and accommodating, and maybe because you were a small piece of a big pie, your role was specific, right? And as you added all the pieces, it came together as a whole. But you left 90% of yourself behind because no one needed it or asked for it. So you just focused on that part and limited anything else. Now, when you release from that and you have a show where there's no pressure. No one can get fired here. No one can get a pay decrease or a demotion. Now's the time to embrace it. And to your point, Jason, I did a lot of interviewing, and I wanted to find a winner. I didn't want to create someone who couldn't reach the bar. Right. And typically what really wowed me is people saying things and doing things they had no idea I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're around somebody long enough, they get to know what you like, what you don't like. They know when to engage with you, or hey, they're in a bad mood, or I see that I'm not going to be talking to them today, right? Yeah. And I think what I love to do is sit down with somebody, and with 2 minutes, I just knew they were real. I could deal with reality. I couldn't deal with opaqueness and kind of disinformation or misinformation or trying to wow me. And that was important. And there's other people I had to give up after 4 or 5 interviews. I had them keep coming back because it was really confusing. They gave me information, but then they contradicted it with their actions or with things they said. And then I said to myself, this is too tough. Because if I'm going to employ them forever, I'm going to be working with a mystery versus somebody that just right out there, who they are, how they are, and you can count on them always being that way. And there's something to trust, and there's something to confidence. And people, there's so many wow type speakers out there, but they're not speaking from their heart.
Right.
They're trying to speak to sell something or to move somebody, right? And depending on the audience, they're going to change, like Kelle says, their speech. When, history has a way of supporting people. If someone's been saying something and doing something for that many years, you can probably depend that that's going to continue to happen. When somebody just changes their colors like a chameleon all the time, you start to wonder, why invest in this person? And the other part of being an audience or having an audience is everybody you work with in one way or another is your audience.
Mhm.
You get together with your family. Well, that's your audience for the time you're with them, and you start to try to bring value. And I think when you can bring value to others, you bring much more value to yourself. There's so many people that want to take value from others and maybe return something. And if they get good at it, that's where the pitch slap comes in, right? It's like, why bother getting to know anybody? Why be authentic? We're just going to take money in today and let the chips fall where they may. And some people have a conscience and some people really don't.
Mhm.
And to them, everything's fair game, and they justify it because it's a dog eat dog world. And if I don't eat a dog, some dog's going to eat me or something like that. And that doesn't really work well. And I think the key is to have fun. If you're not enjoying yourself, because that's free, no one charges you to enjoy yourself. There's no cost of entry. But if it's all work and no play, and it's all give and no get, then it takes away from the opportunity to grow and to really dig in and learn more, get better. I think part of the process that we all go through is finding little things that we didn't know the day before that we learned today that will guide us and support us going forward. So there's so many different ways of measuring success, and too many people do it superficially. Well, how much money are you making? And it's like, well, when you're going to school and you're paying universities big amounts, how much money are you making there? At least here, it's not a big cost of entry, and you can learn from so many people. And the other thing about live streaming, especially on LinkedIn, there's so many other people who are learned along the way, like Beverly, like Leslie, like I can keep naming names, and they continue to progress. So just being an audience member, I was on Carl's show, not on his show, but listening to his show earlier. And I learned something from that. And plus, just being around people who do it reinforces what you're doing. So really being in a vacuum is not a good place to be. And audiences usually aren't found in vacuums. So with that, kind of long-winded, well, here's a Dennis comment. Agree, just being a big hard head doesn't getting you ahead. Get better at connecting. Thanks for still sharing and caring. And, I think gratitude to Dennis's point, and encouragement, right? Dennis could be asking questions and could even take it to the next step and criticize or do something, which is very rare, because there's no need to be here if you don't agree or approve or support what someone's doing. And it makes you want to be a better person for it. So, Kelle?
Yeah, so many great things that you guys said. And sticking with the interviewing, I loved interviewing people. Like, honestly, that was one of my favorite things. And I was good at it. I mean, kind of like Jason, I would get people comfortable. And this is about knowing your audience. This applies in any conversation, whether it's in business, interviewing your team members, because I'm sure we've all had that person that comes into an interview and they're so bloody nervous that like they're shaking, and it's almost making you uncomfortable because they're so nervous. And I've had them, hey, we're just going to sit here and have a conversation. Let's put our hands on the desk. Let's take a deep breath and like get into it. And when you acknowledge someone else's discomfort in that situation, I find that they feel the security and the safety because they see that you care about their well-being, their comfort. Because once you go through that process, truly then the interview becomes easy peasy, and they will tell you likely all the things that you're not allowed to ask anyways. And to go on your point a little bit further, because both of you touched on this, is it helps you see who's going to fit in this culture, because you know your audience. What is your culture? You know, we've said this thousands of times, I know, on other shows, is culture isn't what words are in your lunchroom on the wall. Like, that's not your culture. The culture is how people feel and respond in your environment. And that is about knowing your audience and knowing that sometimes people don't belong in your group, in your audience, not because they're not good enough or any of those things. It's because startups are a perfect example. You got to have some thick skin in a startup, depending on where it is in its life cycle, because it is a fast-paced, lines are really not defined as far as what your tasks are. So you've got to be flexible, adaptable, move fast. And if you're someone who sits on a periphery and is intimidated by all of that, you're not going to do well. So it's not about you're not good enough as a human or you can't do these tasks. It's this environment will likely eat you up, in the sense of you will fade into the background and you will not thrive. And to pay attention to what environments, when people ask that question, it's an important one. You know, where have you worked that you really do well? Answer that honestly. And I know sometimes people, especially in today's job market, they're just trying to answer it because they're like, man, I need this job so bad. I don't care that I don't like this culture. I don't care that I really don't even like what they do. I just want to be here. But the people who are interviewing you can feel all of that, because they generally, it's not their first interview they've ever done. So they're a good read of the room and can feel their audience, if you will. And now I think where did I want to go? There was something that Jason said that I was like, oh, I want to, and I should have written it down. And I even had that thought of, oh, I need to grab my pen. And I should have. I forgot. The biggest lie I tell myself every day is, I'll remember that. But I think now to spin it back into live stream, this is where I'll go this time, is Dawn and I, for so many months when we first started doing this, or I certainly first started doing it with Dawn, you know, there was no topic, there was no word, there was no anything. And I was just like, why are all these people showing up every day? Like, and truly curiosity and how people were interacting. And it was because community, people were looking for a place where they felt safe, supported, and heard. And I think that's such an important thing in live streaming. And what I think most people who I know that are involved in it, what they love about it is the live factor of the audience interaction. Because you're getting immediate feedback. It's a little different than when you're on a stage. Because of course you can see it in a room. And I tell people all the time too, like, doing live streaming is not like, you know, there can be 5,000 people watching. The numbers never have made me nervous here because I only see you two or whoever else is with me. When you're in a room with 5,500 people, whatever the number is, I mean, heck, 50, that can be very overwhelming. It's a totally different vibe. And I've always stated, if you're doing a speaking in a live, you know, situation with your audience, and you're talking about something that is meaningful to you, I've always just looked at the audience as like, nobody here wants me to fail. They're all here and I'm just part of this program, and they're here to hear what I have to say. And everybody's just giving me a hug. Feel the energy, embrace it, and be it. I'm not trying to be anything for them. I'm trying to be here for me, which, okay, see, the idea came back, what I wanted to say, is truthfully, audience is all about us being present in the moment and actively listening, actively paying attention to those nonverbal cues that are in the room, around us, what have you. So I'll leave it there.
Now, those are great points, and I know Jason will take it to the next level now.
Well, I'm excited because you just opened the door for the Don quote that I was going to use in the beginning. So I'm
Yeah.
excited. So Don has said, and I stole this from you, Don, is it's not about having an audience, it's about having a community, because an audience is just waiting for the next act.
Love
And
it.
to your point, Kelly, that's the thing, is that feeling that and being present with that. It's like, and it's semantics, but it's true. It's how you look at it. If you're like, well, I have an audience in front of me and I'm going to tell them this and I'm going to be there and I'm going to, that's one presentation, that's one conversation. But when you're like, I'm here to build community, I'm here. And if they can't give you comments or feedback and you're standing on a stage, and I was a trainer and I've done that, and they can, and they could raise their hand, and definitely, and I always welcome that. But it's still that energy exchange. There's still that you've all felt it. I know you've felt it, and the people of our community out there has felt it at some point in time. Are you losing them? Are they engaged? Are they not engaged? And that's the key. And for this kind of situation, yeah, I like to look at the thread and see a lot of comments and the community. But either way, I know they're out there. And it's the reality is that knowing what audience you're in. And I'm not going to come here and speak about something in a certain way that I would talk about on another show. And that's not about not being authentic. That's about knowing how you can add value. I've been talking to a lot of different people and doing different shows, and I'm like, if I can add value, I'd love to join you. If not, then that's it. We actually talked about that. It's like, if I can add value to the community and what's going on, I'd love to be here. I love to be there. I love to be there, right? But you have to be honest with yourself and say, is this a place where being my authentic self, I can do it? I always said I could talk about anything. Give me a subject, and I'll share a quick little story. When I was interviewing to become a trainer with this corporation that I worked for, young, brash, I was ready to go. And I'm a talker, if you haven't noticed. And I'll admit you learn, right? And I learned, and I said, I'm not here to be the expert in this subject. I'm here to train. I want to be with people. I want to talk. And my trainer, who became my trainer, was like, what did you just say? Because I had to be the subject matter expert in what I was teaching. Of course, I had to know the material. My point was that I love being in front of people. But that was my mindset, was I could talk about anything. We learn. The lesson is, no, you have to be able to give value. You have to be the subject matter expert, or have a way of looking at something that people are going to want to engage with. You can't just get up and talk because you like to talk. So knowing your audience, building a community, and having that shared experience is very important.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets better, this conversation. And I think we kind of cracked it open just now, is it always makes you look back after learning something new now and then referencing it. And I know when I was growing up in the e-commerce ecosphere, and it was early on, and luckily I found things early on, and went to my first internet retailing convention or conference in Chicago, and it was at the Hyatt, and then later it grew into the McCormick place. It was so big, and they allowed me to speak at that place.
Nice.
And it was great, and it was amazing, the people you'd get to meet. But looking back, I would prefer now to just be on panels in front of people instead of being the single person in front of the room, because first of all, you don't learn from anything during the discussion if you're the only one creating it. And if you've got a big crowd and you can't even see who it is out there in the darkness at times, you really don't know how you're doing. I mean, maybe a little applause, maybe a little laughter will give you a hint, but it's all you, and it's too much you. When you're with a panel, you get to take a break like we do here. You get to listen, and just like Jason said, I had things prepared, but everything changed as soon as Kelly brought something up, right? And that makes me in the now with Kelly instead of the before with me, thinking what I want to say and what people want to hear, because you're doing too much presuming and assuming, and that's a lot of responsibility. And you're measuring during the performance. It's like looking at the scoreboard when you're trying to play the game, right? Play the game, the scoreboard will follow the activity. And also being grateful for who you're with, and that's enough to be worthwhile, because it's almost like you go to lunch and you're supposed to have 4 people show up and only 1 or 2 show up, and you're just, where's Sally? Boy, I wish she would have been here. I was hoping, and meanwhile the other 2 people are sitting right next to you. And now Sally became the big thing, when the big thing was who's there, what are they into? And I agree with Kelle. When I got to do interviewing, and I loved interviewing because I felt I added value, not just because I was able to dig into people's careers or lives.
Right.
I also knew I had a huge valuable inventory. I had a 62,000 square foot warehouse, and there was millions of dollars of inventory, right? When you're paying somebody $15, $18 an hour, and there's millions of dollars of inventory, there is a risk factor there that if you don't know the person and you don't take care of the person, give them enough reasons to know you're already looking after them, that they don't have to look at themselves. But also it gave me reference, because that was probably the only time I'd really get to know somebody. After that, they'd started their job and do their thing. And I always started out with, where you're from, what are you into? Getting to know the person, not the profession.
Mhm.
Getting to know them as an individual, and having them get to know you as an individual. And people would say, well, you interview every delivery person, you interview every warehouse person. Absolutely, because without that one person, nothing gets done around here. People measure people by, oh, they're just doing this. But that's not who they are. That happened to be who they are at this point. And the idea was, and people always say, well, geez, I hate starting at the bottom. I hate starting at the beginning wage. And I said, well, you're only doing it as long as you need to. Start moving up, start learning, start growing, start changing. The responsibility is on you, but I'm going to do everything I can to get you as successful as you allow yourself to be. And I think that's what people truly want, is an honest opportunity. Give me a chance. Just give me a chance, but give me an honest chance. Give me a fair start. And too many people say, oh, you only have this much education, or you worked at this place, and because of your past, it's going to really give you your future. And I always say your past should not be the predictor of your future. It should be the foundation of it. That's where you move from. That's where you grow from. And it was really the people who honestly, and we talked about being authentic, would naturally stay later and not feel like they're watching the clock, or come in earlier. And they didn't understand that there are people that are worthy of trust and will show that as a benefit of goodwill. Right? If you keep doing more than you're expected to, or even that you're paid for, there will be a certain amount that says, hey, you had a death in the family. Take 3 days off and we'll still pay you. Or if you need help with your airplane ticket. Why? It happens so rarely. This is a wonderful opportunity. So many people have friends and family in need, and know what they can do to make a difference. And sometimes they don't even broach the question, or they don't even attempt to. Oh, you'll do fine. You'll figure it out, versus, hey, let me help you out here, right? Because how much is this friendship worth, that if it's just a few $100, and if it's just a few hundred to you, it's more than a few hundred to them if they need it.
Right.
Right? If you can afford it and they can't, that's a much bigger gift that you're providing. And they also know, and there's something to humanity, I got someone who's backing me up. I got somebody in my darkest hour I can call, and they'll show up for me. And maybe that never happens, but that feeling stays with them. And it also says, well, if they did that to me, maybe I should do that to someone else. And that's how the world gets better, is everybody who can do a little that means a lot to a lot of people could make a difference. And in essence, that's what we're doing to the audience. We don't judge, we don't prejudge, We take everybody for who they are, as long as they allow everybody to be respected in the same way. So I think when you can build an audience that knows they're welcome, that knows that they're important, and that audience, like I say, transcends to your friends, to your families. And we talk about this all the time, walking down the street and smiling at someone, saying good morning to somebody, right? That's an audience of one, a stranger, but they're only a stranger until you meet them. And then they're an acquaintance. So how many people, there's that last thing I'll bring up. How many people say your network is your net worth? And because money will come and go, situations will present themselves that you never anticipated. But hey, I got a buddy, or I got a friend, or I got somebody, and even if they can't give me anything except a little bit of comfort, a kind shoulder to put my head on, someone to say, it's okay, you're going to be okay, I'm here with you, don't worry. And once you can take that away, that's more than saying, here's $100, help yourself to something. So I believe I forgot. Kelle, good. Good ask then to presume.
Yeah. See, point proven right there. Know your audience. Honestly, the bottom underlying thing that kept coming to mind as you were speaking is allowing your audience, whether it is one or many, is allowing them to know that you care. That really is at the core. And what I want to say too about interviewing, which I just want to make an additional point. Some of the best hires I've ever made in my entire career, or was involved in the process of hiring in my entire career, weren't necessarily people that could do all the tasks. Like, it wasn't the job description they didn't have nailed, had nothing to do with that. And I always felt like you can teach people how to do a task, but you can't teach people how to be. And there's such a big difference. And one example I do love to use is I had an intern many years ago. She was so excited just to be sitting in the room interviewing. She was exploding with excitement. And you couldn't help but feel it sitting there. And she was like, I know that I don't have, and she knew she wasn't qualified by the job description necessarily, but she, in her mind, I succeeded because I'm sitting in this seat having a conversation with you. And what it was about her, it was her personality, one, of course, her overall excitement. She had looked up the company. She knew so many things about it. And it was her eagerness and her hunger to want to get into the corporate world. No one in her family had ever graduated from university, and she had just graduated from ASU, go Devils. And she really wanted to start paving her path in the corporate world. And that girl worked her tail off. If you asked her to do A, B, and C, she was like, well, can I start doing D, E, and F right now? Because I'm also, so it's not always about the checklist and the tasks. It is about the person, because there can be, and we've probably all had this happen too, the person who looks incredible on paper. And this goes to Jason's point about AI. And a mistake I think a lot of people make using AI is it looks great on paper, but then when I meet you, it doesn't match. And it's like, well, ooh, wow, I don't even really know what I'm feeling right now, but this is off. And to expand on the AI portion, I 100% agree with you, Jason. It's an excellent tool. And I tell people this all the time. I use AI. I use it for the basis of a lot of things, but you still need a human person interacting with it to change it, tone it, whatever it is about your brand, whether it's you or your business. And then you have to be very purposeful about what you're asking it to do. AI, say it in the tone of friendly. If I were to all of a sudden start putting out content that didn't say y'all every now and then, everybody would be like, well, this clearly isn't Kelle. You know what I mean? There's things that you get that you know from someone else, and when they don't match, it's just that thing that make people go, huh, I don't know why, but I'm confused, repelled, whatever the word is that I want there, but it just doesn't feel right. And that's the whole part of knowing your audience, when it feels right. And one last little story I want to use because I think it's such a great one, and I can't remember who it was, but it was a huge speaker. Not a Tony Robbins, but like a Tony Robbins-esque. Like they spoke in front of like 10,000 people at one time. And Simon Sinek, thank you, God. I love him, and he is so great at many things. He's got a lot of great TED Talks. But one of his was, I was doing a speech in front of 10,000 people, and mid-thought, he lost where he was going. And he said, and a lot of people, when they get there, panic because it's like, oh God, I forgot the script that I was going on. And the audience feels that when you get into that spot of like, oh, and he just kind of goes, huh, have any of you ever had that moment where you're in the mid-thought and it just leaves your mind? Well, that just happened to me right now. Can anybody help me out? And he brought the audience into what was happening with him. And of course, so many people started yelling out to him where he was, and then people started laughing and embracing him. So he made the audience part of his experience. And I think that goes back to the whole part of where I started this with what you two had just said before it came back to me, was feeling about caring. He cared enough, he's just being honest. Like that's authentic. That's what people love. And then one last thing, and I'll toss it over to you, Jason, is authenticity, I think, is so misused sometimes. And in this instance, knowing your audience, when the things you still need to filter people. It doesn't give you full reign to just say whatever you want to say because you want to say it. Because there's times you shouldn't say certain things. You may be thinking it in the moment, but, oh, this probably isn't the right time for me to say that. I'm going to say it at a different time. Or maybe there's people around and I shouldn't say it. Or this audience of who I'm speaking to about this topic, I probably don't want to use this story. So I think authenticity can also be misused in the sense of, it doesn't always mean that you say what's on the top of your mind, because filters still need to be around. But I'll leave it there this time.
Great points. Jason?
Yeah, love this conversation. So much good stuff. I'm talking about what you said about being authentic doesn't mean just saying whatever you want. I share that with clients all the time, because people are misconstrued where they're like, well, I just was, saying what I felt, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, there's a difference between being an a-hole and being authentic. It's you don't have to be rude. You don't have to be whatever. And is it fitting? Is it make sense? And I think that goes back to the notes that I had written, and you actually said it verbatim, is know your audience and know yourself. That's so key. I had a client the other day that, I'm a Marine. Blue language is something I have a degree in. I could talk, I could use foul words, drop of a hat. Professionally, I don't, obviously, the time and a place. But I have a client that's his world. He's in construction, not saying any judgment, but I love this guy. He's a great person. But he will cuss during our sessions, and it'll come up, whatever. And the other day we were talking, and I dropped a couple cuss words, and I was like, "It's, I guess, the day to cuss today." And we kind of laughed about it, and we kind of joked about it. But I know him, and I know how he'll react to that. I wouldn't do that with any client or a new client, of course, and whatever. But your audience, and know what you're saying, and know how you're presenting yourself. And to your point about the other speaker, there's times when, if you make a mistake, you don't call it out because the audience doesn't know what you're doing. They don't know what you have planned, and you can just keep going. But that was a great opportunity for him to make it personal. He knew his audience. He read that audience. I guarantee you, if he's speaking in front of 10,000 people, he's a good speaker, of course. And he read the audience, and he said, "This is what I'm going to do here because it's going to make the most impact." And you just and you read into it. So know your audience, know who you're talking about, but know yourself too. If you're out there trying to be something you're not, people can sniff that out in a second. It's easy to tell, and you're like, That's not who you are. That's not, you know, I love language. Language has so much nuance. And I sometimes use big words. There we go, big words. And not trying to be important, not trying to be like, I know this big word. It's just part of my vocabulary. And the nuance of the word is that, but I have to be aware of it, like who I'm talking with. Are they going to be like, who's this guy? What's he trying to be? Sound like he's too smart? Because we've all been there. People have used some big words and you're like, that's not necessarily. That didn't really add anything to this conversation. So knowing yourself, knowing your audience, and going from there. I think that's the main thing I wanted to kind of talk about what Kelle had said. And it's a learned process usually. You know, you make those missteps. You talk to an audience and you get done and you're like, shouldn't have done that, you know, or this didn't work, or you watch your audience and you see their faces change. I do some stuff on here live sometimes, and one of them is a no camera, just to let the people feel comfortable, because it's a mixed group. They don't know each other, and it's the process you went through, Kelle. It's a closed camera, and it's harder for me because I'm used to reading people and seeing, are they engaged? Did this hit? Did this make sense? But if I can't see them and I'm just talking, it's a little more challenging. So if I know my audience, though, it's a lot easier, because I'm like, yeah, this is going to land. This is going to make sense. And I could just go on with what I'm doing. So that awareness is key.
Yeah, I think that you make so many great points. And, you know, the first rule I always follow, especially when I'm working with people or having an audience, is do no harm. You know, that should be the first rule, because you don't know who's out there. You don't know where everybody's coming from, where everybody is living in. Could be tragedy that just happened to them, you know, and it's always better to kind of bring it down to the lowest common denominator. And it's not easy to do something long term, but it's easy to do something one conversation at a time. You know, and I relate that to even when I was raising kids. I think I still am, in a sense, as I never said anything that would make them feel bad. You know, every conversation, because I heard this one theory, or maybe reality, that kids by the time they're 5 hear 20,000 no's and 5,000 yeses. And it's not intentional. It's like, don't touch the stove, don't run in the street, don't. Or when you do, what are you doing that for? What are you know? And then it even gets worse. Are you dumb? Are you stupid? Do you remember what I said? And then it even gets worse if there's physical or verbal punishment. Not only did you screw up, now you're going to pay a price. And I thought, I never want to be part of any of that. You know, and I look back and I think, what was the worst things I ever told the kids? And I told the kids things that made them feel good that weren't always true at the time. Like, you're better than you give yourself credit for, or you're really smart, and you know, it's just a matter of time till you start to see it, because it gives them something to look forward to. And I remember my daughter did something it took me a while not to respond. And when I responded, the worst thing I said, which I changed a little bit, what do you got, cornflakes for brains? You know, that was the last, you know, and I stopped myself at that. But at least I could feel like whatever I put out there was encouraging, inspiring, and supportive, right? You only have so many people in your life, especially parents, right, who you remember when things were not doing so good and they took you to the ice cream store, or they made you feel better than you would have felt without them. And you could transfer that to audiences, right? Because, you know, I remember I still have Ford Sykes come on, and he's one of 200 living Hall of Fame speakers that gets 25K in audience. Right. And, you know, he quit school in the 9th grade, never met his parents, just had an awful life, and believed by 21 he'd be dead because of how he was living that life. And he just found a mentor, and it shifted everything around, and it put him on the right track. But he says, with all these speeches I make, I get there early and talk to all the people who put on, if he's talking to the plumbers union, he talks to the people who organized it, and then he talks to people in the audience, gets to know them. He said, I talk to plumbers in a different way than I talk to computer scientists, right? I'm talking their language. I'm not being inauthentic, but I'm becoming part of them instead of trying to separate myself from them. Too many people on the stage use that distance for authority, for I know it, you need to know it, and you need to know it the way I need to share it with you.
Yes.
He says, let's just get together in a circle, be part of the group, because I think that's what people want, is inclusion. They don't want to pay admission and not be part of something. They want to be the star, and people who are generous and are confident in themselves and secure will allow somebody else to spotlight, will take a second seat. Some people are the starring attraction, and some people are very comfortable being supporting actors and actresses. They want to take a supporting role because it makes the movie or the play what it is, versus someone trying to overstep themselves. And plus, it takes less pressure. I don't want to have to carry the show. I don't want to be responsible for everything and everybody. Why not share the responsibility and give yourself some grace in knowing I could learn from everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Who it is, no matter what it is, there's somebody doing something that I don't know that does it better than me. It may not be as important if you measure it against money, but when you get down to that, again, lowest common denominator, people are people. People have feelings. Yeah. People have families, and when someone treats somebody better than most people ever would think of, you've just gotten a great audience member, right? Because when you fulfill somebody, when you fortify somebody, they know where it came from and they know the feeling. And we talk about that all the time. It's not what you learn, it's the feeling you walk away from. Mm-hmm. And when you're around people that make you feel better about yourself, better about your world. And I think the other thing is being able to create hope. Whenever there's hope, there's opportunity. When someone feels hopeless, when someone sees there's no road ahead of me, or in a lot of cases, especially as you get older, you lose relevance. It used to be when you reach like 60, you were old. Now, once you're 35, not only are you old, you're expensive now.
Hey. I'm sorry.
Kelly, good time to segue.
Oh, too funny. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Know your audience. I knew they could take it. So many great things that you guys just said too. And Jason, to go off of what you were saying, like the different, vernacular that we use, like there's certain words that we all say, and knowing your audience is definitely part of that. I think. And it's not about being inauthentic. Oh, you speak different in front of this group of people than you would in front of this group of people. Yes, because they will take in information differently.
Right.
And a good example, I worked in capital markets for a majority of my career. And one of the things that I loved about it is I had 3 distinct audiences that we had to create communications for. One of them was due diligence, highly technical, then advisors, which was much less technical and more from a sales perspective. How do we train them or teach them to teach their investors or their clients about our product? Then there was the investor communication, which removed most all of those things and was down in layman's terms. And why do you do that? One, due diligence. I'm trying to figure out if I want you on my platform. You need to have highly technical people that are researching this on a deep level that's very technical. They're not looking for a layman language. Like that would be off-putting to them. They'd be like, nope, next product for review. But with an investor as an example, which would be the 3 of us as an example, what we don't like as human beings, I think on any level that we're at, and whether it's due diligence advisors or investors in this example, we don't like when we're in a conversation or being spoken to with, however you want to perceive it, in language that we don't understand. We don't like feeling stupid. And when we feel stupid, we repel because we're confused. We don't like what we don't understand. Even though this product that I may be investing in is highly technical and there's a whole lot of things, if you describe it to me that way, I'm not going to want it because it makes me feel, and then it goes to the whole thing. Every buying decision we ever make is on an emotion, period. It's how we feel. It has nothing to do with facts or any of the things. That's what we use after the fact to rationalize our behavior.
Yeah.
It's how we feel. So if you make people feel dumb in a moment or they don't understand, they're repelled from your messaging and that's where people have to be careful when they use big words. Because sometimes I'm a total nerd. I love a big word when it's used properly.
Right.
But there's nothing worse, and we've all seen it. Like let's be honest. When people throw a big word out there and it's like, that was used so improperly. Like that's not what it means.
Right.
But thank you for trying, because you're trying to look like something that you're not.
Right.
And people feel that. You may think you succeeded, but you didn't, because your audience will feel all of those things. Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's so important, and before I turn over to Jason, you do see people who are too slick for their own good, and you can say, I could out-slick you in a minute if I wanted to. But, that's not the key, is, again, knowing yourself well enough, knowing other people well enough that you make them shine as much as they can. So, Jason, final thoughts. It's 56.
It is. I know. I was thinking that. I was like, wow, we got to the point, and always a pleasure and a joy to join you too, and so much respect for what you guys have done and built, and appreciate you having me on here. So two things, kind of disjointed, but two my closing thoughts. So things I've been thinking about. One's from the very beginning that I wrote down a note that I just want to share. It's kind of funny, whatever. But the first one I'll say is, we've been talking a lot about talking to audiences, because here we are, we're leading a conversation and talking with the community. But ask yourself, what audiences are you in? What are you a part of? What audience are you showing up for? Because there's a lot of insight to that. What's calling to you, what called you there, what keeps you there, what's important, because then when the script changes, that allows you to say, well, when I'm looking to build a community, an audience, so to speak, this is what entices me. If you're trying to sell something, why did I buy my last thing? And everyone's different, and we don't have enough time to get into sales because we've all been in sales for sure. But that's a whole different thing, looking at different people buy for, Paco Underhill, why people buy. It's a great book. But so ask yourself, what audience are you in? And what does that mean to you? And why are you there? And does it still serve you? Because a lot of us get into these audiences and that becomes our identity. And then we're like, well, I have to think this because of this, and I have to be like this because of this. Let all that go. I'm gonna just say that. Let all that go. You're yourself. If you found yourself in an audience, if you followed a group and you ended up in a meeting for something that you don't care about, the door is open. You can still walk out. So I'll say that for that. The last one is kind of funny, but it's one of the top 5 bits of advice I've heard in my life. And I was thinking about the difference between Don talking about the difference between a community or an audience and a community, because the audience just wants to be entertained and they're waiting for what's next. We have a huge culture built around that right now. So here's the advice. Have character, don't be a character.
That's important. Very great distinction, Jason.
Yeah.
And, one thing before switching it over to Kelle for the final word is someone brought some up and it rang a bell inside of me, and it says, I don't root for anybody who doesn't root for me, And, you see, like in Denver, the Broncos are the big deal, and people are spending $100 for a t-shirt, and they're spending all this money to go to game, and these guys are making $20-40 million a year. And I'm thinking, I wouldn't change a Little League game for a Bronco game in a second, or a Girl Scout meeting, to root on whoever I really care about the most. And that's what really sticks with you, because there is a difference between superficial and deep. There's a difference between being a fan and really being part of a community. So those are distinctions I hope everybody can appreciate. So Kelly.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll be quick because I know we're at the top of the hour. Man, that went by so fast. And I know we say it all the time, but it's true. Is to remember, the world is our audience. No matter where we are as an individual, whoever is around us is our audience. And I will just end on, kindness is free. Be good to the audience that is around you. Smile at someone if you don't know what to say. Because I do believe that we have the ripple effect, and the impact we make on others will ripple to others beyond them. So as I always say, go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
That's beautiful. Never tire of hearing that. Always inspiring. And last thing, among all last things, is you are in a sense like Santa Claus everywhere you go and everybody you meet. You always have a bag full of presents, which are usually compliments or something, but they're sincere. It's one thing being authentic with yourself. It's another thing being authentic with someone else's situation. And I know how tough it is to be a checker in a grocery store or someone who takes something out to you. And it's how hard is it to say, really like that dress you have on, or you're really so kind and polite every time I'm in here. It takes like 30 seconds, but that will last the whole day for that person. That knowing someone really took the time to see something that meant something to them. And it could be a ring, it could be anything. And you usually get a story. Well, that was my grandmother's, and it was so important, and I love wearing it. And thank you very much. You cement things that were kind of loose and not appreciated. And, who knows if you get anything for it, and who cares? And last thing is this show, among others, makes you almost dreamy about the conversation, where it does take so little stress and so little pressure to be good at it, right? Because when you're with great people, you can be good enough and still be great, as part of the composite. So, what we always say, if you can't do it, could we do it? And we can. With that said, thank you all very much. Hope you come back Monday. Monday, actually, we're going to have Con and Carl together, which is a rarity. So that'll be a great combo. And Tuesday, we've got Beverly and Lance. And then Wednesday, we've got, I believe, Carl coming back and Kelly and probably Jason or Carl. Not Carl, but Dave will be part of some show. So I want to thank you both so much and really appreciate what you do for me, as well as so many people out there. And actually, we've had almost 40 people watching this, which is kind of interesting because only a few comment, but hopefully people are enthralled with what they're hearing and can't break away from what they're hearing to comment, which is a good thing.